Well, hello everyone. Today we are joined again by the Nerfherder Co, and we're so excited to have you on again. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are the both of you?
Doing
Doing
well.
great. Yeah, the last time we had you on, we were celebrating May the 4th and the start of the Bad Batch, and now here we are, the start of another new Star Wars project. So, made sense to have you back on.
No, thank
Yeah.
you. That feels like it was forever ago, even though it was only just May.
All right, yeah. Yeah, it feels
Yeah.
like it was just yesterday and also 100 years ago in the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Time is weird right now. Like, I'm almost kind of like saying last year, March 2019. And then it's like, if I look at the calendar, I'm like, oh, it's almost 2 years now. Not ready for that. But with, the real world stuff, going on. But it's kind of hilarious because, like, I do have a copy of The Odyssey of Star Wars, an epic poem, but I don't think anyone is talking about it because, like, what's happening right now is Visions.
Yeah.
So, Melissa, like, what was your, like, if you had to choose, like, top 3 Vision episodes, what would you choose?
So yeah, this was definitely tough. I mean, obviously all of the animation fits into like the Japanese anime genre, but they're all very, very different. Even if you look at the kind of animation style, some of them may be similar, but the way they tell the story is so different, or the way that they use music. So I feel like the ones that I picked are kind of very different. I feel like touches on different parts of the anime genre, but my number one, just right off the bat, and this one was easy to pick, but it was the Duel, episode 1. I thought that was such a great introduction to Visions. It looks so different. Yes, it's animated, but oftentimes when people think of anime, it's not that kind of style. But I absolutely loved it. I loved the storyline. I loved how the animation fit into the whole Ronin story. That one for me was just perfect. And then of course, you've got the what people are calling the umbrella lightsaber, which I thought was just amazing to look at, and I think put General Grievous to shame. So
Yeah.
so that episode, just from top to bottom, was awesome, and that's one that I would, love to see expanded. I know it won't be, but that would be one I'd love to see, more episodes on. And then my second one was the Tatooine Rhapsody. I thought, including in there, some J-pop or Japanese pop, was so cool. I started listening to Japanese music like, oh, this makes me feel so old, like literally 20 years ago, just, through illegal downloading music. Don't tell the FBI that I said that, but
Yeah.
and so including something like that in there, I thought was really, really cool. Obviously, it's kind of way outside what most people think of when it comes to Star Wars music. And, I saw some people's comments that they weren't a huge fan of it and they didn't feel like it fit the Star Wars universe. But, the whole point of this series was to think outside the box. It's not canon. So I was kind of fine with whatever they wanted to throw at us, but I thought that was really cool. And then obviously we got to go to Tatooine. We saw, things that we've already seen before. Exactly. And I thought that was really cool, doing something new, but then bringing in something that, we're all familiar with to kind of maybe ground it a little bit more. And then I kind of have a tie for my third favorite episode, but for like two very different reasons. So the tie is between the Elder and the twins. With the Elder, that one, I don't know, I just love the mood of the episode. I loved the storyline. I wanted to know more, about the old guy, and kind of how he got to where he was. I love the interaction between Master and Padawan. Like, I wanted to know way more about the Master and things like that. I love the whole tone of that episode. And then with the twins, I loved where they took some of it. The lightsaber battle between the two of them. Basically out in space. Some of the stuff they did, I just thought visually it was so cool. And then, of course, anytime you throw an X-Wing into anything, I love it because the X-Wing, besides the Millennium Falcon, is my favorite, like, Star Wars ship. So, yeah, so those two, they're pretty close in terms of how much I love them, but obviously for very, very different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it sounds like if you were big into, like J-pop for a long time, so was Vision something that you were looking forward to? Like when they announced it, that there were going to be these anime shorts, were you, yes, give this to me? Or what were your expectations going into watching these, I guess?
Yeah, so for those that don't already know like anything about me at all, but my husband, he's Japanese American and he lived in Japan for 5 years. So since I've known him, which Facebook actually just told me 12 years ago, we became friends. So we've been married, about 7? So because he spent so much time there, little bits of Japanese culture have kind of always just been, have been a part of my life since I've known him.
Mm-hmm.
So I always like anything that's kind of, Japanese related. And then, of course, when you put Star Wars together, like that's kind of, made in heaven for me. However, I've never really been that much into anime. When I was a little girl, like I did like watching Sailor Moon. When I was a teenager, I think the only one that I ever watched was I think it was Gundam Wing. But besides that, like anime hasn't really ever been my thing. So from that perspective, I wasn't like super, super excited. However, I thought this was a great opportunity to kind of introduce hopefully kind of parts of Japanese culture to Star Wars fans, because many of them, may not know that there actually is a connection between so much of Japanese culture and filmmaking and Star Wars. So I thought marrying those two, made absolute sense. And I love how all of the episodes turned out. So the first trailer that came out, I was pretty excited for it. I won't lie. Probably a little more excited than the Bad Batch, but don't shoot me for that, anybody, please.
No, it's all good. We were both very excited for it as well.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I think that Star Wars Visions will inspire a lot of people who are going to become the next generation of creators. Like, this probably will inspire them just as much as, like, maybe the original Star Wars inspired a lot of people. Like, that's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm excited to eventually show my kids some of these episodes. I mean, they're too young now. They're only 4 and 2, but I think there's some of them that would be fun for them to watch, to kind of introduce them, I think, to some aspects of Star Wars, obviously like lightsabers and things like that. So yeah, like you said, I'm excited for kind of the next generation, or even maybe some people that are a little newer to Star Wars to watch Visions, because I think it's a great introduction as well as a continuation of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, and I've just started today. I just started going and watching kind of the little like behind the scene featurette. They have one for each of the episodes that kind of talks about the the production company that made these, and where they drew their inspiration, and kind of what their perspective on the story they were trying to tell is. And I think that stuff like that is super fascinating to see where these creators drew their inspiration from within the Star Wars galaxy and from elsewhere. And we'll get into that a little bit when we dig into some of these articles. But yeah, I think that's really great. And like Cassia said, I think it's going to be very inspirational for people's from a lot of different backgrounds coming forward to tell stories and Star Wars, and and hopefully in other kind of fandoms and things, to just see more creative energy coming to it.
Exactly.
Yeah. It perfectly celebrates the connection that Star Wars and Akira Kurosawa films have, and kind of like the greater Asian influence on Star Wars. And I was like, oh, I love it. It's just so creative and so inspired, and I hope that Visions continues. So I'd be surprised if it didn't.
Yeah, that's right. We shouldn't get off the hook. I think that we made Melissa give her top 3 Visions episode, which is really hard to do because there's really nine top episodes. But I think we should probably have to give our top 3 as well. We put her on the spot. We should probably go through the ringer here too.
Okay. So we did have a Patreon episode where we kind of talked about them. But my top 3 is kind of similar to you, Melissa. My number 1 is The Duel. It's just like, I can't think of anything better that they could have started the season with. It's such a unique art style. Like, it's a black and white film that looks real, but it's stylized, and it just tells a simple story. And I like how the protagonist is not a Jedi. He's a Sith, but it's kind of like he's not mustache twirly evil. He has, like, a balance to him, and it just kind of seems more real than sometimes the 2D, kind of Western, like, very good or very evil, and I think it's the most beautiful out of all of them in my subjective way. And then I would say the Ninth Jedi is close behind. It just was incredible and whimsical, and I was like, I really would like to see a continuation of this. It's just so unique to see just this episode. It felt like a whole movie, and I wanted to see it continue. Like, you have a lightsaber forger, and, like, I love forging stuff. Well, I guess I forged one thing one time, so maybe I can't say I love forging stuff, but, like, I forged a sword, so, like, it was really cool just to kind of, like, see a lightsaber forger or smith, lightsaber smith, and just all the different colors and the twist, like, who's Jedi, who's Sith. And I would love a book, or, like, in Vision Season 2, we get a continuation. And then I love the twins. It's just so over the top, and it kind of felt like it harkened back to some of the iconic pieces from the sequel trilogy, like, artistically, and it's just like I love that it's like a dark side girl, and her brother is trying to save her. It's just kind of a reversal, because it's usually like girls aren't evil, and just to see that was really cool. And I loved the end. It just filled me with so much hope, and I'll probably end up doing a post on it sometime. Maybe, like, when this episode releases. Like, we're trying to release it, like, kind of the same week as the Star Wars Visions Ronin novel by Emma Miko Candon comes out. So by the time this episode comes out, I'll probably have already posted my thoughts on Hope. But those are my top 3. What about you?
So my top 3 have changed kind of a couple of times, but these are the ones that I kind of immediately connected with. So I'm going to go with these 3 for myself. So the Ninth Jedi and the Elder, for, pretty much the same reasons that, Melissa and Cassia have, both kind of talked about those. And then I also really liked Akakiri. I liked that just kind of the way that the story was told, and it was kind of set off on this path that, was always going to kind of end this way. And I liked how it was kind of like a little bit of an homage and a little mirroring to the Anakin and Padme story. And I just kind of liked that. I don't know. It's like a sharp bleakness, which is not great, but I don't know. Just something about that just kind of lingered in my mind after it ended. So so the Ninth Jedi, the Elder, and Akakiri were my top 3.
Yeah. So speaking of Anakin and Padme, I did try out the Across the Stars candle, and, like, it just is if you want something kind of like Roses, but kind of, I don't know, like a little bit more complex, like I would say try out Across the Stars. So recently you've kind of updated you have a new website, and it's very artistic, and you even like included some blog articles. How did that update happen?
Yeah. So I used to, before I had kids, or even before I had, full-time jobs, I used to always love to write, and I've wanted to try and find ways to kind of get back into it a little bit. So I thought adding a blog section to my site, even if in the end of the day nobody reads it, I felt like it was kind of a good like mental exercise for me to kind of stretch those skills a little bit. And so in some cases, I've been using it as part of like my small business and creator highlight that I do every Saturday. And so I, do a little interview with a small business or creator, and then I post that on Saturday with pictures of their work so that others can go and read it. I also want to talk about different aspects with Star Wars, some of my favorite parts with it. It's kind of my plan. And then also I wanted to discuss like different tips and tricks for using the products that I have, because I've had more people than I thought I would have, the wax melts, for instance, be the first ones that they had ever purchased in their lives. So they weren't entirely sure how to use them. What kind of wax warmer should I get? Things like that. So I figured creating kind of a static article for stuff like that would be nice for people to kind of reference. Or if somebody asks me, I don't have to type out a whole response to them. I could just be like, hey, check out this blog post here, and it kind of gives you all the information that you need. Or if you have any other questions, you can reach out to me. So it's kind of been a nice little dumping ground for different ideas that I've had. And I felt like it was a good platform for me as well with the visions to focus on some things related to Japanese culture with Star Wars, kind of in the lead up to Visions for people to read if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Kind of taking a look at the website here, I really like the kind of bold. You have these, very large, pictures of the products and things on there. So it's very nice to look at. And yeah, it's always good to have like a, just a collection of resources, like you said. So if, people are looking for your products to get tips and tricks and, find out more stuff and get the news. You have a newsletter that you send out by email, which is pretty great as well. I think Cassie and I both get that one. So.
Oh, perfect. That's good to hear.
Yeah. So we were thinking like this would be a good time to have you on and like kind of go through the Visions articles that you put out on your site, and kind of like so we could like learn more.
Yeah, sure. So the impetus to kind of start those articles was when the first trailer for Visions came out. Obviously, because I was curious. I was reading some comments. I was even seeing some TikToks about it. There were complaints that people didn't understand why they were doing an anime style series. What does anime have to do with Star Wars? What does Japan have to do with Star Wars? And I'm like, oh, okay, let me teach you. There's plenty out there. And so I was excited to start this, also just kind of given my background with, Japanese culture. Like I am by no means an expert whatsoever, but I thought that I could at least do kind of, a high level analysis for people so that, for those individuals who didn't already know about the connection between Star Wars and Japanese culture and Japanese film, this could hopefully help them kind of understand why doing, this series in the form of anime made 100% sense. So kind of just based on the timing, I picked 4 different things to look at. So the first one, and also because she's one of my favorite characters, but I took a look at Japanese influence with Padme. Then I looked at the Jedi. Then I talked about, Kurosawa. And then I ended it by talking about Kintsugi, which I'll go over a little bit more at the end. So again, I tried to keep these, a little more bite-sized. I wasn't going to take the time to, type out a dissertation. I figured, most people probably wouldn't care to read that anyway. So I tried not to get too academic with it. And again, just keep it something that, somebody had 5 minutes, they could kind of read over it and go, okay, that's cool. And so that's why I picked these 4 items. So the first one that I did, again, was on Padme. And I really focused on her whole look, in particular, looking at her, especially her makeup and her hair that was done for the throne room look, which is, of course, the iconic red dress with the lights on the bottom that, of course, had to, as I found out later, had to be like plugged in, for them to work in the movie. But that was the one that I wanted to focus on because even looking at it really quick, I could see off the bat, without doing any research, that there was clear influences from geisha in there. And then I'm sure most people are already aware of, but, geisha, they're female performance artists that are trained in traditional Japanese art forms and like dance, singing, music, tea ceremonies, and things like that. And today they still have geisha, but they're obviously a much smaller population than they used to be. And so you could see in her makeup where, she had a white face. Geisha also do that as well. The red lips, the way her hair was done, it was very clear that there was a lot of inspiration taken from there. And then obviously, besides me doing my own analysis on it, you could see information from the costume designer as well as the concept artist, that really backed up what I saw in there as being, a lot of Japanese influence in it. Then the second article that I did was looking at the Jedi, because you can clearly see how there's a lot of influence drawn from samurai. And, again, I'm sure everybody knows what a samurai is, but just so we're on the same page. But, samurai were the warrior class within, feudal Japan. Like today, unfortunately, there's no actual samurai left. But they were highly revered, and they had their own, basically honor code called Bushido, and this almost kind of is similar to like the Jedi code. So like they had their 8 virtues that they followed. So like justice, courage, benevolence, politeness, honesty, sincerity, honor, loyalty, character, and self-control. And obviously right off the bat, that sounds pretty much exactly like a Jedi. I'm just adding there, that you can't get married for whatever reason. But, and so the more I looked into that, I thought how interesting that tie was from the Jedi to the samurai, just in terms of how they were supposed to act. And then, of course, when you look at what, Jedi wore, it's very, very clear, especially with the tunics and the cloaks, that those were drawn right from samurai. So like the different pieces that they would wear. Now, granted, samurai tended to wear something called a hakama, which is a skirt. And we didn't see the Jedi wearing that. They, wore pants and boots, but their tunic and their cloaks looked exactly like what samurai would wear, even down to how flowy they were, which to me never made sense to me why it needed to be so flowy. I feel like I would just be pushing it up everywhere, trying to get it out of the way as I'd be, trying to fight somebody bad, but it looked great. So, so that's totally fine. But, so I saw, a lot of connections between, samurai and Jedi. So I wanted to make sure that, I focused on that in one of my articles. And then recently, I finally got around to watching all of the behind the scenes stuff for The Mandalorian. And as I was watching that, and I'm glad I watched it because it, jogged my memory on this, when they're talking about kind of some of the influence that they've used, besides obviously, George Lucas and all that he created, but, especially Jon Favreau, he kept dropping the name of, the Japanese director Kurosawa. And so I wanted to make sure that one of my articles, I focused on him, on who he was as a person, because I'm sure a lot of people kind of know his name, at least in passing, because he was such an influential director. But I wanted to make sure that I kind of brought him to a little bit more of a wider audience, put a picture to his name, and things like that. So in there, I talked a little bit about him as a person. And then I talked about how his work directly impacted Star Wars. There's, a quote from Lucas that talks specifically about this. So, it's not exactly an original idea that I had to talk about Kurosawa. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit more was showing some of the influences in Star Wars that you can very clearly see from, in particular, Kurosawa's film, The Hidden Fortress. That one, as I was reading it, almost kind of felt like, did George Lucas plagiarize a little bit more than I thought he had? I know we keep saying influence, but just because I thought that one was really interesting, where the story starts, with two peasants. They're escorting a man and woman across enemy lines in return for gold. They don't know who the man is that they're taking with them. Turns out he's a general. The woman's a princess. Things like that. I'm like, that sounds pretty much just like A New Hope.
A princess in disguise, too.
Exactly. And then, they come across like the big bad guy that they have to fight. Like, I just thought it was interesting. I know Lucas said how he was, heavily influenced by it, but I'm like, is it a little more than influence? But either way, you really can't deny the impact that Kurosawa had on filmmaking overall, and then Star Wars. So in the blog post, luckily somebody already did this work for me. I linked to a YouTube video that somebody took scenes from A New Hope, put it on top, and then they took what you could say might be like a corresponding scene from that film, The Hidden Fortress. And you can very clearly see the influence in there. So I just thought that was really interesting. And then for those people who may not be film buffs or don't really know anything about Kurosawa, I thought that would be kind of a good introduction to that, to kind of see like, yes, as it is, A New Hope, was incredibly original, but, it didn't reinvent the wheel. Here's where it kind of took, some of the influence. So, so that was something that I wanted to make sure that I discussed in an article. Then the last one that I did, this one was partially educational, partially, admittedly, a little bit of an ad for what I was going to be releasing the next day. And I wanted to talk about something called Kintsugi. So Kintsugi is basically the Japanese art of taking broken pottery and bending it with lacquer and then putting like gold, silver, or platinum on it. So it's the idea of, when something breaks, a lot of times we just throw it away. We don't bother to fix it. But there's the idea in Japanese culture, or at least a part of it, that no, take these broken pieces and make something more beautiful from it. So we can see Kintsugi in Star Wars, actually in The Last Jedi, when we see Kylo Ren's helmet and how it's been fixed, and it has all those red lines in it. At the time, obviously, I didn't know it was Kintsugi, but my husband kind of thought it was. And so when we were trying to figure out kind of what to do with these, the triangle vessels, which, you had given me the idea to do them as a Sith Holocron series, which is fantastic. He looked at that and thought, oh, that kind of looks like Kintsugi to me. So when I typed in Kintsugi with Star Wars, this popped up, that was the influence behind what they did with Kylo Ren's helmet. Director J.J. Abrams actually talked about it. He didn't use the word Kintsugi, but he does talk about the process, about taking like a broken ceramic item and fixing it. So because of how striking that looks, in particular here where they used red, which is not typical with doing actual Kintsugi, I thought, that might look really cool doing it with this Sith holocron with, Kylo Ren obviously being a Sith. So with this article, not only did I want to discuss Kintsugi so people could understand like the idea behind what they did with Kylo Ren's helmet, there was something a little bit more in depth behind it besides, just trying to fix it and sticking glue in there. There was a little bit of symbolism behind doing something that was inspired by Kintsugi that basically, with Kylo Ren, aka Ben Solo, basically trying to mend and fix what's broken, basically trying to make it a little poetic, I guess, if you want to go there. So along with explaining what Kintsugi was, I wanted to also introduce these new candle vessels that we've been working on and doing research and development on them for, I think, weeks. So it's been kind of a long process working through these. So first I described what Kintsugi was, and then I went through kind of how we created these Sith holocron vessels, that we hand pour them with the concrete. We hand etch the lines in there and paint them. We etch them in, and so that's why I called them, this is Kintsugi inspired, because the first one that we did as a test one, we actually did break it, which that gave me so much anxiety, like breaking something we made. I was like, okay, we can do it. Like my husband put it in a bag, whacked it with a hammer. I'm like, okay. And we glued it back together and things like that. But that was just a painstaking process because there was the gluing, there was the sanding, all that stuff. And of course, when it came down to it, I was like, hey, let me see if like we've sealed it well enough. I'm going to try putting some water in it. Oh, water just started coming out and trickling down all these spots. I'm like, it looks good from the outside, but that's really not going to work for a candle. So we figured because that was such a time intensive process that we would change them to instead Kintsugi inspired and etching the lines in. So we're not trying to like glue little pieces together. And then we paint in the lines by hand. Wow. And then of course, the shape is influenced by the shape of a Sith holocron. So it's just like a portion of the triangle, not the whole thing. But we thought that kind of worked well together. And then we put 3 wicks in there to make sure that it reaches every single corner, just because it is a weird shape, not your typical circle. It needs a little more help to kind of make sure that the wax will melt evenly. So it's a little more finicky, but the way it's turned out, it's honestly the best thing I feel like I've created. And I've kept like 2 for myself, and every time I look at one, I'm like, ooh, maybe I should keep that one. I'm like, no, you already have 2, it's fine. Introduce the world to the rest of them, but the whole Kintsugi tying that to the Sith holocron, for me at least, I've been really happy and proud with how these have turned out so far.
Yeah, it's a work of art, and like triangle concrete vessels that are painted in Kintsugi.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Kintsugi inspired. Like I think you're the only one I can really think of in the world. So like it's really cool because I think I snagged the last Dark Lord of the Sith candle.
You did.
Which I'm so glad I did. They went fast, but because like I was just looking at it and I was just like, man, do I want to burn this? I just kind of want to like look at it for a really long time, and it's just so cool because I can tell like it took a lot of work to create. It seems like it's chrome silver painted, and then I did kind of notice like I was like, oh, it's not broken, it's hand etched. And I was like, I wonder how they like create like the Kintsugi inspired lines. Like, do you do that while it's drying, or do you have like a drill, or how do you create those?
Yeah, so we have to wait until it's completely dried and cured. So like we can take the concrete out of the mold that we use after about like 30 minutes. But we usually like to wait, 4 hours before we touch it. Because especially with, the dry air and things like that here, like there's a ton of different variables that we try and just leave it alone for as long as we can. So usually we don't even etch it the same day. We'll kind of give it, about 24 hours. And then when it comes to the etching, what we do is we kind of, we take a pencil and we draw lines just to make sure that, things kind of look good and kind of make sense, like how something might actually break. And then from there, we take a little Dremel, and we have a rotary tool that we put on, and it's like super, super small that will then etch out these lines. But the tools that we're using are admittedly not really made for concrete. They're usually made for doing like woodwork and stuff. So we go through those little rotary tools pretty quick because it's obviously much harder on them because of the concrete. But, it's been worth it to work through that whole process because we think it looks really good. And while it's not authentic by any means, because we're not actually breaking it, we still think it gives enough of the vibe, I think, that most people will kind of understand and get it and won't criticize the fact that it's not legit Kintsugi.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely pays a nice homage to it. I'm just looking at the pictures here on the website, and it looks really cool the way it comes together and then gets painted in. So.
Yeah. It's a work of art, and some of the candle vessels, like when I'm done with them, I put plants in them, but I'm like, maybe I could like keep this one on my desk, not like with my plants, so I could see it more, and just kind of looking at it, like it's almost like the triangle is kind of like, I think I kind of realized like why it's the Sith symbol. It's because like it's kind of like a pyramid, and like there's a lot of people vying for the top spot, like to be number one Sith. And then with Jedi, it's 4 equal lines, like everyone's equal in the Jedi order, like, supposedly. But like it's kind of more about balance and kind of like building blocks, and like each line is equal, and like it's almost like the Knights of the Round Table, except it's a square. So like so yeah. And when I smelled the Dark Lord of the Sith candle, I was kind of like, oh, like this kind of reminds me of like a Count Dooku scent, like kind of like I kind of just imagine Count Dooku, like the scent, like if someone asked me, I'm like, it's probably like he probably has some very nice clothes that are like freshly ironed, so it's like kind of like steam, maybe like a little bit of cotton or silk or something. But I was like, that seems like it's it, So
yeah.
So you've created like some beautiful Sith holocrons, like, and released them in time for Visions. Like you said, you had plans for Jedi holocrons. How are those plans kind of going?
Yeah, so those are in the very, 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 very beginning stages. Like we just did one, I think this past weekend, just to kind of see what one might look like, and also testing out kind of a new technique in terms of changing the color. And so that honestly, just because we're coming up to the holidays, won't be really something that I think I'll be able to work on in an earnest way until probably the beginning of next year, which I know sounds far away, but it's really not.
In marketing, it's already Mother's Day,
Exactly. Yeah. So because I already had a square mold, although it turns out that it's way too big. Like this test vessel we made is massive. Like it would cost, I swear, like $25 to ship. So definitely not worth it. But it was fun taking a look at kind of the color that we could create, which I absolutely love. We also did something, and it was kind of tough to show it in the picture, or at least make it look interesting, but we did the bottom of it where it was actually white. So 2 different colors, which we haven't done before. And then one thing I'm going to test as well, because again, these are inspired by these things. I'm not directly copying any of them. What I'm also thinking of doing is taking some basically gold leaf, not actual legit gold because that's way too expensive, but and gluing it on there and making kind of another like layer on it. Because I've seen some other people, especially on Etsy, who create, concrete vessels, and I see them do this work with gold or silver flakes, and it looks absolutely beautiful. And so I thought that might be cool to kind of tie into the different lines that are on the Holocron that, we're kind of basing at least this first model on. This is major early stages, but it's definitely something that I'm going to pursue because naturally I already have a lot of, Jedi sense, a little bit more than I do Sith. So there's a lot more characters that I could use this one for. So it's definitely something I'm going to do, but I think it's going to take a little bit more, research and development to get there. But, we figured it out with the Sith Holocron, so I know we'll be able to do it for this one.
Yeah, I'm excited. If I had to be obsessed with candles, I'm so glad I found your Nerfherder Co. because, I think it's just the perfect candle company for fandom. Not just Star Wars, but you have Marvel, you have some Indiana Jones, even some Hamilton, and many others, and it's high quality scents and beautiful candles.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I wanted to find some way to kind of differentiate my stuff from literally the hundreds, if not thousands of other candle companies out there. And so since now I've kind of established, I feel like a good customer base and a good reach, I feel like it's given me a little more flexibility to then start thinking a little bit more outside of the box in terms of kind of how I present things. Because, I have, my candle vessels that I already have that I buy from other suppliers, and I absolutely love them, no complaints with them. But, there's other people that, buy those same ones, and I can find people that, make candles and use those same ones to sell them on Etsy. So, besides obviously having my scents tied to specific characters, like we've mentioned before, I want these to also kind of be like little art pieces that will look nice in your home and don't maybe immediately scream like Star Wars or Harry Potter or Marvel, so that somebody would come into your home and not know that you're a major Star Wars nerd. Again, that not shaming that at all, but if you're the kind of person that might want to keep that a little more on the down low, having, say for instance, like a Sith holocron in your house like this, a non-Star Wars person isn't going to know what that is. They're just going to think it looks really cool, but you'll know that it's Star Wars related. And so that's what I want to start doing. Is really with these candle vessels is making them, more unique, more inspired by Star Wars. And I'm really happy so far with how these Sith holocron have come out and, the reception that they've gotten. So we'll kind of see how the Jedi holocron turns out, and then we'll kind of go from there in terms of where else I can pull from Star Wars to, create these different candle vessels.
Yeah, and we'll be loyal, customers until our dying day, probably. But
yeah, definitely, absolutely.
Yeah. So we talked about just for the listeners out there. So the Dark Lord of the Sith, it's kind of like a smoke kind of scent, and then what are the other two? Is it the Kylo Ren and Darth Maul scent?
Yep, that's correct. So with Kylo Ren, I went with something that's a little spicy smelling, almost a little cinnamony, because I kind of wanted to lean towards his whole, I wouldn't say it's just one side. It's his entire kind of anger. And it kind of felt a little bit more of like an aggressive scent to me. Something that I feel like, somebody like him could wear. And then with Darth Maul, that one, it's actually based on, I don't know if it actually still exists, but I know it did a long time ago. I'm pretty sure my brother may have even used it. It's an Axe scent. I think it was,
Okay.
I don't know, remember if it was dark chocolate or something like that. And it was just kind of a very manly-ish, but smooth, slightly sweet, because you got like that dark chocolate hint in there, that I went with on it. And it, it's kind of strong, because I feel like he'd be the kind of person that, wouldn't really be bothered by the fact that you could smell his cologne, from 15 feet away. That wouldn't bother him. And so that's where I kind of went with on that scent. So I would say probably overall the Sith scents are stronger, because again, that I feel like that's just kind of built into their personalities, and they're more in your face, naturally more aggressive. So that's kind of common with all of them. And then, as you discussed with the Dark Lord of the Sith scent, which is for Darth Vader, I went with something that was a little bit smoky, which kind of ties to the Anakin Skywalker scent that I have that has a little bit of that smoke scent too. And then that you can also kind of smell a bit of campfire, and then a little bit of suede, which I kind of thought went well, thinking about
his cape,
like his suit and things like that. Exactly. So that's where I kind of went with those scents. So
yeah. So the message, we're trying to impart is like, if you can snag one of these Sith holocrons, you won't regret it. It's a work of art. And then, do you have any candle teases like for kind of like the holiday season?
So nothing specific, I guess, for the holiday season per se. I mean, I released my Halloween and fall items, and then I'll do some stuff for Christmas later. But that's really, I think, all that I kind of have planned that will be brand new. However, specifically in speaking to you, and then of course with the news about what is it? The remaster, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
Knights of the Old Republic. That kind of pushed me, I think, a little bit. That probably, I would say within the next couple of weeks, I will probably have something for Revan. So that's my plan.
So I'm, trying to keep it cool and not nerd out too much, but So
Cassia's already refreshing the website just to get her order in as soon as it comes out, for sure.
Keep that, refreshed. So
I figured the both of you would like to hear that, but that's been on my brain for a bit. But I figured I'll just get to that next year. It'll be fine. But with the recent news that came out in the trailer, I'm like, well, I should probably push that a little earlier than I had planned. So I am hopefully going to be also including that as part of the Sith Holocron series as well.
Oh no!
So I'm just gonna try and knock everything out at one time. So.
Oh man! Oh my gosh! I'm like, oh darn it! Now I'm gonna have to get 5. Darth Revan Sith Holocrons, but it's fine.
Well, don't worry. Yeah, this series, I call it special edition just because it does take us, really 2 to 3 days to create a single one. So they are special edition in terms of the stock will be kind of small. However, it's part of my permanent line. So, if you can't get one during, one time I restock it, don't worry. It's definitely going to come back. So don't stress out too much if the first round you can't get one. It'll come back.
Awesome. So
that's good. That's a huge weight off of our shoulders for sure.
And if you ever need if you need us to explain the KOTOR, to you, and any suggestions, we humbly offer, our expertise. So
sounds good.
Yeah. So where can our listeners find and support you?
Yeah, so you can find me at Instagram. I'm pretty active on there, posting pretty much every day. I'm also on TikTok, although You will not see me do any, dances or things like that. It's really just to kind of, show off the products. You can see them in real time versus just one static picture. And then if you also are on Facebook, you can follow us there as well, because I cross post my Instagram and my Facebook posts.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Absolutely. And if you want to make sure you know when the new KOTOR inspired scents or any other new scents are coming out, you should definitely go to your website, which is the nerfherderco.com, and make sure you get signed up on there. You can read through the blog. You can get, I think, signed up for the newsletter on there. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep. Right at the bottom of really every page, you can sign up for the newsletter. They're pretty easy.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks again for joining us, Melissa. And to all of our listeners out there, may the force be with you.